Welcome back to Current Issues in Athletic Administration. We are in episode 8, I believe, in this new show and journey, trying to shine a light on what we as athletic administrators are wrestling with, both at our site and maybe outside of our site in our local organizations. But happy to be joined today by Rafael Sevilla, all the way from Modoc, California. Go look for it on a map. You might find it. Coach, thanks for being here today.
Yeah.
What we do here as we are building this show out is we generally begin with a question that I stole from Anthony Thomas, who I just got off the recording with, actually. That is, what weighs most heavily on your mind right now professionally? What does that look like for you?
I honestly think it's the lack of knowledge that outsiders have in what we do. I think that's a huge one. I think this vocab word that's been stuck in my head for the last year and a half, 2 years, is complain. And I'll give you an example. I was talking to my principal about when our boys basketball practices and girls basketball practice could begin. And you got people talking about, oh, it's a holiday weekend. And this is twofold because I came to a school that is my alma mater. I came from a school that like Fall River High School that had been successful like for a long time. And you don't get those type of complaints at a different small school than you do here. So my work is we're going to get as many games as possible. My coaches want 28 contacts. We want to go play big schools, medium sized schools. We'll travel, we'll do this. We'll do tournaments over Christmas break because in my head, that's what we did when we were kids. And it's the balance of I had somebody complain about scheduling a game over Labor Day weekend. And I'm like, I didn't even know that was this weekend because that's my mindset. I'm trying to get these kids opportunities to go to tournaments, to go to places that are outside of our league teams or playing other teams that are different divisions, right? And I'm not the biggest mathematician, but I look at the playoff points that happen and these matchups. If you're playing a D2, D3, D4, we're D5. So in the northern sections, these things matter. Explaining that to a person who doesn't understand that, you're talking a different language if I was speaking Spanish to them. And so that weighs heavily on me twofold because I like to care about family time because I know it's important. Because from a professional standpoint myself, that's something I've been battling with for the last year. My wife does a great job of being my supporter, but I also got to support her in the aspect of what we do in our personal lives, right? We're not stuck in a gym a couple weekends a year. And that's our vacation time sitting in a gym watching our daughter play. That weighs heavily on me because those are things that I do have to think about. But again, in the complaint train, I don't schedule a couple tournaments over Christmas break. There's always going to be that person that says, hey, how come we're not doing this tournament? And just trying to get our kids ahead and getting them opportunities because we're tiny.
What do you think is the genesis of those, let's call them complaints or lack of understanding? And what do you do to hopefully educate people as to why these choices are being made versus what I feel sometimes is the assumption that we don't know what we're doing and our goal is to negatively impact everybody's lives?
I think honestly, fundamentally listening to them and what they're trying to say to me, because I can sit here and tell you, oh, they're just complaining. They're especially when you're going in on holidays and stuff like that, their family time is important to them, right? And so for me, it's being an active listener when it comes to that, because clearly I am trying to do my job and get our teams to be more competitive, bring back a winning tradition to our school, encourage student athletes to keep their grades up so we don't have to worry about those things and change the culture at our school, because the culture at our school, it's a work in progress. I came into something that like I think people were just handed things, kids, and in the small town, there's a bigger spotlight on like you have a once in a generation player because they happen to have the height or the skills or whatever. So you cater to them, right? And they've never really had to work for anything. And I think that's the genesis of these complaints. It's like, why are you making my kid work hard? I'm not making your kid work hard. I'm trying to teach your kid how to work hard because that's life, right? And so I've been told I'm a little passionate about what I do. And here's the thing. I'd be the first one to tell you that I think it's one way to do it, but there's multiple ways to do it, man. I can't motivate one kid the same way I motivate another. But what I can do is, hey, if you're struggling, pick up the work ethic. You gotta work harder. You want minutes? Show me. In any sport. You know what I mean? And a lot of that is I'm the soccer coach. And honestly, I'll be honest with you. I think my team is the most closely knit team on campus. I want to lead the way on that. And those are my expectations. That's what I lay out. Like first class or no class is what I say every single time. And my kids work hard. And I have no complaints when I'm coaching soccer. You know what I mean? And that's not a knock on all my other coaches, but for me, it's that cultural value, instilling the hard work, the dedication, the commitment. And not all kids are going to subscribe, but here's the thing, if you get the majority of your kids to subscribe on your team, it's a domino effect at that point. They want to be at the team dinners, they want to be at the team activities, they want to take the overnight trips. And you start figuring out that they're going to work hard regardless and going to be earning their minutes as much as they can. And so I'm trying to instill that across my program, and it's tough work.
How do you, in regards to the situation you described with vacation conflicts, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the winter season, which I would
Yeah.
imagine it pops up more than any others.
Yes.
Help educate, not in a patronizing way, but what I don't think people fully understand that the winter season by its nature has two built-in breaks into it that no other season has, right?
Nope.
And in order to honor the athletes that are competing in that season, you can either take all that time off, which is going to have one impact, or you could practice every day but Christmas and Thanksgiving, which is the other extreme, right? And then there's all kinds of gray area in between. But how often do you actually sit down and talk with your community about, hey, look, this is why this season is different. And how do we meet you where you are?
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, I haven't had that conversation. And I have parent meetings. And I'll tell you why I haven't had that conversation because I come into something and my previous school and then the school before that, it was just the norm. You're going to go and do things. And I remember I got us into a tournament at our previous school that happened to be like that small window between Christmas and New Year's. And there was some blowback, but at the after all that blowback, there was all those parents supporting their kids at that tournament. And so I again, it's going back to the active listening and actually taking the time to sit down and talk to them because although it seems foreign to me that they're like, oh, we value our family time, like I have to take that into account and I have to open those doors. And coming from that question you just asked me, that's something that moving forward I'm going to do because the naturally built-in breaks, the wallowing in mediocrity over the past couple of years in these programs, right? Like it's amazing how much sport can increase even the academics. Like I've seen it. I've seen it where it's like, oh man, we're AD Sevilla over here scheduled this 28 games, and here we are like doing three tournaments in the winter. And the kids are happy, right? At least that's on paper, surface level, they appear happy. And so I think a lot of that is too is making sure our kids are involved in these conversations as well, because maybe they don't feel that way. But these are the same kids that if you didn't have them in tournaments over break and then you drop them into league season in January, and all of a sudden they're about 3 or 4 steps behind everybody else, then you know why. And then comes those fountain of complaints. You know what I mean? Our kids aren't prepared. Our kids, because parents love watching their kids be successful in those competitions and they want home playoff games. They want all these things that they haven't had before, or it's been a while since they've had. And it winning doesn't solve everything, but it does help cure these conversations.
Yeah. And I think where sometimes as I'm processing what you're sharing, we fall short, and this happened this fall in one of our sports, is we don't front load communication around the situation that we're walking into. So in our league, there's an equity makeup where you get promoted or relegated each year based on your success. And we get promoted up to the big kids division, as I call it, and we're taking our lumps
Uh-huh.
and it's affecting the morale. And at no point do I believe that a conversation was had around, hey, here's our new reality.
Yeah,
And even though we're taking our lumps here, we've beat everybody in our old division. So it's not that we're unsuccessful. There's just a different standard here. And how are we adjusting our success metric
yeah,
to align with our new reality, right? Or you and I talked about this when you were on the other show. As a boarding school, half of our kids are gone over the break. So I'm not going to bang my head against the wall and create a bunch of misery for everybody
yeah.
because we're not getting that opportunity. I take it as a challenge and I joke with my buddy who's the coach locally. It's, yeah, what practice are you on? Oh, I'm on 65 and I'm on 30. And so it's like, well, how are we understanding the Stevenson vacation hangover and measuring ourselves on the back end of the league season rather than on the front end, right?
Yeah,
Knowing that we haven't picked up a ball for a week and or two for that matter. And I think that those conversations administratively and then at the sport level help potentially alleviate some of those column complaints, but I just think it's lack of information.
it is. It definitely is. And I think that I'm very open. That's the thing. I blasted my cell phone, my email. People know where I live. I don't shy away from conversations. I really don't. But I try to tell people, hey, I work for my coaches, and if my coaches want these certain amount of games, like I remember when I came on last year and my varsity girls coach, we had been talking since before I even started working there. And he was talking about, he's looking at the schedule, he's looking at games from previous years. I want to play this team, I want to play that team, I want to play this team, I want to play that team. And we're talking numbers, we're talking D3 teams, D4 teams. We're going to go play a D2 team on November 25th because that's where I used to work. And that's a relationship that I have. We have nothing to lose if we lose that game. You know what I mean? Nothing. They have everything to lose if they lose that game. But the simple fact that I'm providing these kids opportunities, we're not seeing the same teams over and over again, especially in the winter season. There's value to that for these kids, and also vice versa, because Reading is about 2.5 hours away from us, and that's Enterprise High School in Reading. Last year, they came to us. The Monday of Thanksgiving break, they came over, and it's something that I always preach, man. When I worked at Fall River, we'd have these playoff games against these D6 schools in Sacramento, and they're private Christian schools. And one of our biggest home field advantages, man, or home court advantages was if there was snow on the ground and these kids came up. Because the minute they get off the bus, 90% of those kids are 5, 6 years old again, and they get out of the bus and they go run and play in the snow. And so there's double that value, man. We don't have the things that you have around you, the Targets, the McDonald's, the Starbucks, this stuff. So like when our kids come to these schools out here and they get to eat a Chick-fil-A, they get to eat it, like that's something for them, man. And it doesn't matter what generation it was. I remember when we'd travel and we'd come to Reading and be like, oh man, we're gonna go eat at a fast food place today. That's exciting for the kids, man. You know what I mean? And so it again, I like your take on sharing that information. And I feel like I'm an overshare. I and just overshared this morning. We were talking about issues that are in our scope right now. During a soccer trip a couple weeks ago, we traveled with volleyball. So we were in Weed, California, and after we went and played volleyball and soccer, we stopped off at one of the exits off I-5 where there's a bunch of food. There's a McDonald's, a Wendy's. Kids are excited. There's two volleyball coaches and myself, and we have about, I don't know, give or take 35 kids. But we've always just gone and done our own thing. Hey, stay on the buddy system. We're gonna go here, you go there. And we had an incident where somebody tried to get two of our girls to get in a vehicle. And so and they came and told me I was in McDonald's, and the dad I went into dad mode. I went outside. I'm like, what color vehicle? What color this? What color that? And we accounted for everybody. Girl was shook. I felt bad because my daughter is around the same age. My daughter's a sophomore. This girl in particular is a freshman. So I was, like I said, I was out there. I was like seeing red and trying to make sure everybody was safe. And I failed because what I should have done was call law enforcement right away, call the parent, call our administrator, and I didn't. I failed to do all three of those things. And so we get back to Alturas later on that night. A couple days later go by, and the parents of that girl approached our coach. And I happened to be out of town during that volleyball game, but I get a text message from the coach because she happens to be my daughter's mom, and they were pissed, as they should be. And another week goes by, and I'm sitting in a meeting with my admin and those parents, and they were upset. And my only response to them was like, I failed you. I absolutely failed you. And so now in the process of oversharing, my principal wants me to do travel itineraries for our teams everywhere they go. And at first I'm like, I thought I had solved the problem with a meeting, but sometimes it doesn't go that way because these parents in particular are looking out for the future kids too. So now we have put systems in place and coded the process. Those three things I told you I failed to do, that's coded into our handbook and our coach's handbook. And when my winter sports meeting comes up here in a couple weeks, those winter coaches are going to get our kids. When you guys go out and eat with our kids, when we stop somewhere, the kids have as many options as there are adults. If there's three adults on that bus, you guys get to pick where you go, and all the kids are your responsibility. Nobody gets to go off anywhere. If somebody wants, it's weird. These kids like going to the gas station after they eat now. It's weird. I don't know if they want snacks, candy, whatever. But I told them, I was like, unless we all go, nobody's going to the gas station. But again, when I fail, I don't try to front like I didn't fail, man. Like I'm taking that parents and doing all these things, and I wish the process would have been a little quicker because I thought that me be going into dad mode solved everything on that trip, and it doesn't. And now we have to protect the rest of them, making sure because that I-5 corridor off of weed, if they would have gone that little girl and her friend into the car, they would have been gone in an instant. You know what I mean?
No doubt, especially there. All right, let's pivot. That's what weighs most heavily on your mind. What is consuming most of your bandwidth right now? It's not necessarily on the same vein, but part of what I think we run into in our roles is the urgency of certain things and the day to day of certain things. And then there's these other more ethereal projects that we're trying to work on, or things that are problems we're trying to solve versus logistics we're trying to get done. But I'm always curious, like what people are doing that's consuming most of their time.
I'm doing a lot for the first time in a long time. I love this job, man. I love doing the day to day. I fancy myself somebody that's always gonna love doing this. I have dreams and aspirations of doing it at the collegiate level because I feel like I'd be pretty good at it. But I'm also in the middle of an administrator credential program. I teach 4 or 5 periods. I coach soccer. I think this is the most heavily I've been stressed in a couple years. So like that moving pieces of trying to be that AD and the teaching salaries, what puts food on the table and trying to be a great teacher and trying to contribute to my school and academic community is really they have this phrase at small schools and even at big schools, you're a man that wears a lot of hats. And my hat collection is getting a little too big almost because I got these exams to do on the administrator credential side. And I'll be honest with you, man, I don't even know what I'm doing in that class. I think it's just because it's the next step, but I am learning some fundamental values of like how to build teams on the administrator level. And when it comes to culture at the school and making sure that our academics are on the up, I'm so highly competitive because our test scores just came out, CASP, and to make everything a competition. And I brought up our league teams and I compared them to us. We're sitting in fourth place, man. And that's killing me because now on the administrator side, sitting in these administrator courses, I'm starting to think about what are we going to do to get those scores up and sharing that data with kids and just a lot of responsibilities, man. I did the playoff points for the northern section for fall soccer this year. And that was crazy because it comes from somebody that did them for 25 plus years. So I'm taking over for somebody like that. I'm the soccer advisory committee chair for the northern section, and I'm the rep to the state now. And so I've been sitting in meetings. I'm on the CSADA board now, northern section VP, taking over for somebody that's done a pretty good job out of Paradise Adventist, Jason Iyer. Just those things like that, man. I'm trying to jump through all these hoops to, I don't know, I know what I'm trying to do, but it's that excitement. I feel like a little kid, man. I get to speak at the CSADA conference in April in Reno. God knows what I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it.
You got a lot. So I think there's plenty of things that you can talk about. Let's move on to the northern section then. What's going on in your section that would be good for the rest of the state to be aware of, if anything?
I'm gonna go with my bread and butter because I saw it at Copa America this year with soccer. Copa America's it's the Southern Confederation of South America, Colombia, Brazil, all those soccer teams. And they played this year and USA plays in it and all that jazz. And it's cool, man, because I was watching the tournament over the summer and during one of the tournaments, I think it was in the knockout stage, instead of going into overtime, they went straight to penalty kicks to settle the game. And I was like, Shasta Cascade League's been doing that for 3 years. That's my baby. And the kids loved it. My kids were like, oh, dude. I was like, nah, that's probably not what happened. Somebody brought it up. 3 years ago, I sit in Fall River. Soccer's the only sport that ends in a tie. I legitimately, I mean, I can't think of any other. We don't have field hockey. We don't have lacrosse. I don't know if those end in ties, but soccer.
I'll answer that after.
Okay, so soccer ends in ties. And I brought it up. And, nobody cares about fall soccer up here. And I say that loosely because we're trying to build that, right? And so we decided instead of ending in ties in our league, we were going to go straight to PKs. And it's made our league so much better, man. It's made our league so much better. The refs love it. And so I'm trying to bring that into the winter season too. That's going to take a lot more work because we have all the big schools out here and that's their tradition. They like ending in ties.
Yeah.
And the crazy part about it is that all the refs that do our league are the same refs that do the refereeing in the winter soccer.
Right.
So that's something I'd like to bring because they're about to embark on bringing a state championship to soccer.
Mhm.
It just makes the competition better, man. It's like any given Sunday, some team that's sitting there at 1-7 could come in and play the game of their lives, and they take them into. We just beat a team this year that it's actually the team I used to coach, Far River. It's where I started my varsity career. Since I got to Modoc, I have not beaten them in 7 opportunities, and it's fine, right? I think about that stuff. My kids don't. They're like, ah, and then
Yeah.
last game of the season or second to last game of the season, dude, we went into their house and we tied with like seconds to play, and we go into to penalty kick shootouts, man, and we did it. And it's the first time in 7 years we've beaten them. And the kids were jazzed, man. And that's what I love about coaching is that moment the kids get. And I feel like this particular switching from ending in ties to going to PKs gives opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be there. So I think that's something I'm interested in.
Yep, no doubt. Really quickly, less than 30-second answer. What do you think it will do to fall soccer when the state championship comes in soccer and it's in the winter?
I don't know. It's something I'm trying to figure out, man. That's something that I'm currently working on. You're talking about bandwidth. That's got about that much of my bandwidth right now because I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what happens. My prediction is that there will be no more fall soccer, but we'll leave that for another day. Other thing that we usually talk about on the show is if you could ask any other athletic administrator a question that you've been wrestling with, what would that be? And while you're thinking about that, the tradition is to answer the last question. And so that was, how do you manage your people, meaning staff, coaches, parents, managing adults, when in theory, our job is about helping to create the best situation for kids, but we're often also managing adults, right? Our staff, our coaches, parents. So, what are your techniques for that? What secrets do you have? What are you trying to figure out? But that was the question that came on the last show.
Um, Me personally, those preseason meetings are super important. I like to go to I'm at every game, so I like to talk to parents while they're watching their kids too. Especially tournament time too is another great time to talk to parents as well. My managing adults is simple. We all have egos, especially like on the coaching side. And we share athletes. I had a couple football players on my soccer team, a couple soccer players on the football team. And I always tell coaches the dual athletic thing is for them to get that life skill about multitasking and having different responsibilities and commitment. It's a life skill. When they go to college, they're going to be working, they might have a job, they might be on an athletic team, they're balancing a bunch of roles. And I'm just honest, man. Like when we did this 3 years ago at Far River and the football team ended up winning a state championship that year, there was a lot of ego that needed to be put aside. And that's first and foremost. It's a conversation I do not mind having because it's the truth. We got to put kids first. Nothing's ever going to change that. If you're trying to if you're doing this job, the coaching job, pad your own ego, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And so opportunity for me is what that encounters and having those difficult conversations. And I thank my 14 years of waiting tables and managing restaurants for being able to have those difficult conversations. And that's a skill that I think I'm good at. I don't shy away from. Sometimes those conversations don't end well for me, but failure never really stopped me from doing anything. You know what I mean? It's just a workaround, man. It's building relationships. And I'm sitting here in year two, and what can I do different from year one at this school in particular? This is year four for me on the AD side, but I've been at two different schools and it's different. They're both small schools, but it's different. And so you got to approach adults in a way where you're not trying to patronize them and that easy open communication. That's why this thing has become like my best friend because you open up those avenues for that. And I think that's one of the best things that I do.
Yeah, and I think that is a way that I have found success as well, is just being accessible. And I know that's not the case for everyone, depending on size of school, what their outside of school situation is, whatever their approach might be. But at least for me, everybody's got my cell number. Everybody knows they can call it and let's
I,
figure it out. Yep. All right, back to you now. What is it that you would want to know if you could ask a question of somebody?
I don't I don't want to say this and offend anybody because it's not who I am. They get me at a bargain basement price, man, for all the stuff that I do. And so one of the big pushes when I went to the CSADA, my first go around in 2022, 2021, whatever it was, San Diego, a couple years ago, there was a couple presentations on going to school boards and being like, hey, this needs to be a separate position and it needs to be high $90,000, $100,000, whatever it may be. I've met ADs in the state that make they do the same things I do, except
Mhm.
you throw on teaching and all this stuff that I do. And that's something that I love to ask somebody in the know. How do I get? And here's the thing, man, I'm not gonna live and die on that hill because I love doing what I do. It's the stipend doesn't define me. My work ethic does. I'm gonna keep doing it. I hope not to get stagnant, but those are things that I love to know. Just because 3 years ago we got a couple of workshops about going to your school boards and being like, hey, you have a principal, assistant principal, and the schools here in Reading have athletic administrator positions. I don't necessarily know what those salaries are, but I know that when I was at the CSADA conference 3 years ago, my first one, I met an AD in LA that makes six figures.
Mhm.
We were sitting there talking, and the only thing different that we found out that I did is that I taught.
Yep.
She didn't.
Yep.
So those are just that to me is, and that's for me leaving the place better than I found it, man. That's not necessarily even for me.
Yeah. Now, we will leave that for the next guest and see what kind of advice they have for trying to help our colleagues in schools where the athletic director position is not a full-time job yet. And those are things similar to trainers, right? How are they getting those in the schools as well? So we'll leave that for the next guest. Coach, thanks for being here today. Appreciate
Yeah.
you as always.
Thank you, man. Take care.